Awesome, and we are live on the Gamification Revolution. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Abe Zickerman, coming to you from the partly cloudy and oh so cold New York City. And I am joined from St. Louis, Missouri by Barry Kirk and Bill Hennessey from Maritz. Hello, Barry and Bill.
Hello.
Hey, Gabe.
Woo-hoo.
And audience.
It's two guys, one mic. That's our new weird YouTube video that we're going to be doing. So I'm super excited that everybody's together. As many of you know, Gamification Summit, G Summit, is coming up in June, the 10th through the 13th of June in San Francisco. The early bird deadline, which saves you a bunch of money and stuff for G Summit, will end on, actually ends tomorrow night, Friday. So you should make sure that you get your tickets for G Summit before tomorrow. That's gsummit.com. There's lots of cool people speaking there. There's lots of festive discussions, new mini workshops, big in-depth workshops. It is going to be super amazing. And I would love to see you. Now, for those of you who are joining us live for the first time, welcome. If you want to chat or ask questions or even be on camera, if you've got a camera, you can come join us on camera. All you need to do is log in with one of your social media accounts and then just click the button, type in the chat. You see all of our great regulars are here. Nice to see everybody, and all of our new guests are joining. So there's like a robust conversation, and you don't want to miss out on the conversation, so log in. And if you're watching this after the fact, if you're watching in reruns or listening on the audio podcast, thanks for joining us. Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern time, you can join us live on the Gamification Revolution. Okay, the bees from Maritz bees. Now, Maritz has been doing loyalty stuff for a really super long time. So here's a question for you. When did loyalty get so crappy, and what can we do about it?
When did the loyalty world get so crappy?
Yeah, when did loyalty programs get so crappy? Like when they first came out, they were like amazing, right? And even I remember when I first started flying for work in the mid 90s, just using the airline word, but it doesn't have to be about the airline. I first started flying for work in the mid 90s. It was so awesome. And then something terrible happened. What happened? And how?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm getting a little reverb here, so I'm gonna pull this out while I talk. But I think what happened was that nothing changed after that point. So we essentially adopted models in the consumer loyalty space that worked for baby boomers, and then we never thought we had to change anything after that. We didn't acknowledge that we have Gen Xers and that we have millennials, and that they want a different kind of experience. So essentially, we're still offering the same construct in a loyalty experience that we would have done 40 years ago. And that makes no sense. We wouldn't do that with any other product experience in the world except loyalty programs.
So this is part of the moment at which kind of loyalty and gamification, sort of come together. And there's a lot of aspiration that gamification would do something good for loyalty, right? That it would help transform it and make loyalty more fun or make it more scalable, right? Dutch is talking about it being synergistic. But I don't think there's been a ton of gamification applied to loyalty programs, certainly the big ones yet. What's the reason for that?
Just because of the reverb, Gabe, we're having a little trouble hearing what the last part of the question.
Sure. The question is, why haven't loyalty programs adopted more gamification over the last few years?
Yeah, that's a question that keeps both of us up at night, I think. And I'll let Bill answer on that too. We've had a lot more experience and success, frankly, at Maritz in getting our clients who do channel programs to use gamification. So where they're working directly with a sales force, it's like a no-brainer to them because they see the competitive social aspect of selling, and they want to engage more around that. But I think the part of the problem with the consumer space is they've been using gamification forever, right? It's always been a part of loyalty programs, but they've had a hard time seeing why they would change beyond what they've always been doing. They're sort of stuck in this model of, well, this is what works, so why should we add to that? They're like, we've got enough game mechanics, why would we add? And so they're always interested in the conversation, they just won't go beyond that.
Do you think there's a kind of inherent conservatism about loyalty that surprises people? Because Dutch describes it as if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and it feels like that a little bit to me. But the other thing that I was really surprised by is the idea that there's loyalty programs can be quite conservative. And aren't they kind of conservative in their view of behavior? Aren't they sort of like, aren't they sort of very traditional when they think about how they shift behavior?
Yes. And I think that part of it is also a focus on the final result and not the steps to getting to the result. So I think it's kind of the financial aspect, and we see this in all of our programs for consumer and for channel. There's a strong desire to focus everything on that final transaction. But the power of gamification and loyalty, I think, is leading people to that final step. It's very difficult to control the results, but you can control the smaller behaviors that lead to the results that both parties want.
So the smaller step thing is very interesting, right? Because we often talk about it as being a funnel. But I've talked about before how loyalty programs really, they don't even think about the customer until the person actually buys something. And often in many of the programs, not just talking about airline, but many loyalty programs, you don't really level up for quite some time until after you've started. Do you think
Right.
is there an opportunity to shift that thinking? Is there a shift underway? And how would you, given that you guys are really experts in this, if you were giving advice to people thinking about loyalty, to kind of think about this issue, the funnel of behavior and the steps, what kinds of things would you tell them?
Yeah, I think what I've actually found in my experience is the sweet spot for applying gamification right away in every loyalty program is at the beginning of that experience, not necessarily at the acquisition stage, but at the onboarding spot of the experience. Because any of us who've worked in the loyalty space a long time, we know that the engagement curve for programs is, I get people enrolling almost immediately, they just disappear from the scene. So people love to enroll in loyalty programs, but they have a hard time sticking with them. And gamification, and I've seen this in actual application over and over again in practice, is excellent for giving people a path at the very beginning of a loyalty program experience for mastering the elements of the program and for moving you forward so that after, say, the first 30 to 45 days, you actually feel like, I get this program and I know how it works, and I've earned enough equity and I've earned enough mastery of it to now really want to stick with it. But most programs don't do that today. They just sign you up and say, well, good luck, and we hope you enjoy redeeming 12 months from now. And that just doesn't work because people won't stick with it.
Right. And the people need triggers early in the especially when they're new to a program. They're going to want a bunch of small wins and small challenges, right? And you build on that. They become experts, just like in a game. You don't have your big boss fight as soon as you walk through the first door in Doom 3. You have to build up to that. And the things that we're learning from game designs, it makes perfect sense. And we also transfer some of our knowledge from sales programs into consumer. A lot of sales programs are really good at those steps to the sale kind of thinking, that we have a new salesperson. First of all, we have to get them to make the phone call. Then we have to get them to read the product literature. Those little things that they reward, we can apply that same kind of thinking to consumer loyalty, so that when the consumer is ready for that first redemption or the first big purchase, they've kind of been led down the path perfectly, and they're a much more informed consumer, much more likely to come back, and they've formed a habit of working with that brand.
Well, let's talk about that habit formation thing for a second, because that's really super interesting kind of angle on this whole thing. You talk about getting people onboarded, getting them to, kind of interact and engage, and then make a habit out of making a certain choice. But in many of the cases for loyalty, especially if we're talking about something like retail or services, is it really habit, or is it like, are they going through the process of making this decision kind of every single time? Right? Like, is it really
Yeah,
a habit for me to like walk into Bloomingdale's instead of going to Macy's?
yeah, I actually think it's a little bit of both. So we sometimes use the language of habit and ritual.
Right.
And I do think habit is part of the path of getting to the point where you're always making the conscious decision. But frankly, at the beginning, we'd be happy just to get you to sort of mindlessly do the behavior we need, just to get into that being a part of your experience. Like, so in game parlance, that's grinding behavior, right?
Right.
So we're actually okay with grinding behavior early on in the loyalty program experience. because we have to shift you from whatever it is you're doing today to this new experience with the brand. Here's the problem though. Most loyalty programs in the traditional construct never get past grinding. That's all they ask me to do. Swipe my card, make a purchase. It really, they don't want you to be thinking consciously about it. And that's a huge mistake, because real loyalty is more ritual based, which is, hey, I'm going out of my way to engage with this brand. I'm thinking about going to Starbucks, even though it's 5 miles away, rather than the convenience store to get my coffee that's only a mile away. And so part of what we do when we use gamification in a program is to say, how do I use it at the beginning to establish habit? But then notice when's the right point to say, okay, habit's not enough now. I need to start giving more choice in the game experience and give me more interesting and challenging things to do, so it becomes more ritual based or more choice based, more thoughtful. But I don't see a lot of programs doing that yet. They're really still stuck kind of in just earn a badge, earn a badge, earn a badge, and eventually that's not very meaningful anymore.
And it would really help if brands would think about, in between those transactions, what could the brand give to the consumer that engenders both engagement and loyalty to the brand, instead of just always waiting for the consumer to kind of initiate the transaction. What can you give back between purchases or between interactions so that it becomes a habit, so that when someone thinks of banking or money, they think of this bank, not anything else. When they think of shopping for clothes, they think of your store, not anything else. And that's a fantastic tool for use of gamification to kind of do those little give backs to the consumer, asking nothing in return.
So that's really interesting, right? Let's talk about the role of surprise and delight, because I think you're sort of touching on that a little bit, Bill. This idea of something unexpected, something giving back to the user. It seems like loyalty programs are not especially good at doing surprise and delight. They're very much about structuring a set of rules for the average player. Many times those rules are kind of broken. We've touched on them. We'll talk about them some more. But they're not really good at like sort of just purely delightful experiences. Do you think that it's possible to keep doing surprise and delight when you have an established customer loyalty program? Or do you think at some point the customer demands that they know exactly how everything's going to work all the time?
Well, and that's why a lot of programs don't use much surprise and delight, because there's this sort of bias that says a program only works if it's completely predictable, right? Because people need to know, well, how do I earn this thing? And when should I expect to be able to redeem for a reward? So I think we would agree that predictability needs to be the core of the program, but that's where gamification comes in to bring the surprise and delight, or I would say more randomness, right, is really what we're talking about. I'm going to pay attention to an experience that I know isn't entirely predictable more than the one that is very predictable, because I don't know what's going to pop up. So I think any program is going to be more effective if you use gamification to enter randomness. It's sort of like saying, expect us to do unexpected things. So you need to pay attention, because that'll happen. Now, I think you can go too far with that. There's a brand that I love, Panera Bread, which has based their entire loyalty program on randomness. And I actually don't find that as effective as if they gave me some core game design that I should pay attention to and learn and master, with a lot of randomness on top of it. But instead, what they've done is said, you'll never know what's going to happen. And I think that's actually a recipe to also turn your brain off, because there's nothing to figure out. Right. So I'm not even going to try to. I'll just, if it happens, it happens.
And so here's one of the funny things about this, which is Beth Case, a regular viewer of the show, just before you mentioned Panera, she typed into text, she said into text that she loves how Panera is so random, and that they're constantly sending her things that she doesn't expect. So one of the funny tensions about all this, not to shift gears on you, but one of the funny tensions is there seems like there's not necessarily really absolute right answer. Like some people, maybe Beth, really likes the randomness of Panera. So how do you guys, I mean, Maritz, the link to your motivation blog is up there. It's maritzmotivation.com, the blog. It's a great resource to look at motivational science. How do you guys navigate this? How do you navigate this, Barry, Bill? If you were giving advice to people interested in becoming experts at doing this kind of stuff, how do you separate the idea from the practical? How do you know what's going to work and what's not? How do you solve these problems?
I think it's a good time to talk about segmentation.
Yes, it is segmentation and design thinking. So there's more than one type of person involved in a program. People respond to different things different ways, and very often I think we design to appeal to the designer more than we design for the people who are going to use the program. We do what we call a persuasive design lab, which tries to help companies work with us to design programs that appeal to a broader audience. And one of the things we always find is that the kind of psychographic makeup of the persuasive design lab participants, just because of the way companies choose people to do this kind of work, is very different from our studies on the North American general populations segmentation. So if we're not very purposeful in choosing the right tactics and strategies that are going to appeal to that broader swath of the population, we're going to design perfectly for people who are just like us in the room, but we're going to completely miss other people. So and Panera is a great example. Panera appeals to people who like novelty and surprise and delight beautifully. But someone who isn't a big fan of surprise and delight, who wants some degree of predictability, there's less for them there. Other programs are totally predictable, and they don't offer anything for people who like surprise and delight. So you have to know your audience.
So another good example, I think, is My Coke Rewards, which is a project I've had some experience with. And you may be aware that they've been piloting gamification with their Coke Zero product, and the entire experience around the Coke Zero part of My Coke Rewards is really socially based. It's about earning badges and points for connecting socially with other people around that brand. But they didn't eliminate in that experience the point and redemption part of My Coke Rewards. So for people who, it still appeals to me to, hey, I want this to be transactional based, I want to earn points, I want to hold off, I want to redeem for some tangible item. They didn't remove that part from the program. They just said, hey, if there are other things that would appeal to you as well, you can kind of self-select into this. And I actually think that's the best way to design the experience, where I've got enough different elements going on that I can self-select into which one is meaningful to me.
Exactly.
But you just set a very high bar when you talk about designing a program that does both of those things, or things that appeal to sort of both groups of people. And I think traditionally, some of the tension there is actually about even more fundamental questions about mastery and about the purpose of loyalty, and about how these companies actually fit into people's lifestyles and what they think their relationship is to the customer. One of my experiences is often that people think of this as being very transactional and very utilitarian. Can you talk about the emotional side of loyalty and engagement a little bit? Like, beyond just like a place where I come to get my bread and I'm making sure that I swipe my card every time. What are the emotional aspects of that, and how do we design for those so that they're meaningful?
Yeah, we try to actually help our clients understand there are different flavors of loyalty. And the one you described, it's transactional, we oftentimes refer to as mercenary loyalty. So it's the loyalty that I'm paying for, right? And hey, I'll be loyal to you if you pay me, but I'll be loyal to the next guy if he's willing to pay me a penny more, right, to go do that. But that's like 90% of loyalty programs. And what we're always trying to do in our design work is to move the level above that, which we call true loyalty, which is resisting the competitive offer. So just because I can get it for a better price somewhere else, I'm not going there. And why is that? It's because there's something that's emotionally connecting me into the experience. It's actually an irrational choice, economically irrational, to stick with a brand that doesn't give you the best price. But a lot of people do it if you do a good job at it because you've connected into me some other way. You've appealed to my emotion, my sense of play, or to who I am as a person, my value system. So I think a lot of brand choices really, that especially brands that don't even have loyalty programs, are based on, hey, this matches with who I am as a person. And the top tier of that, by the way, there's one above true loyalty, is cult loyalty. And that's where the brand basically becomes part of who I am as a person. And I don't think you can actually manufacture cult loyalty. You either get it or you don't. But you can absolutely manufacture true loyalty, but it's where that emotional piece comes into it.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because there's a retail store that's been in the news lately for some issues. Is my wife's favorite place to shop for stuff for the house, for detergent, for some kinds of clothing, etc. and she was viscerally angry over the bad press that her brand was getting. She has an identification with that brand. It's probably right on the cusp between true loyalty and cult loyalty, but that brand has nurtured that through their selection of what they put on the shelves, the designers that they work with, the way they make their stores feel, and the way they communicate with my wife, if no one else. And she loves it. She will go far out of her way to shop there for something that she could stop in 5 other stores closer and pick up.
Sure. I'm that way a little bit about United. I'm constantly so angry at them for being such a bunch of mess ups. Like they are literally just ridiculously terrible at everything. And it's because I actually like care a great deal about them being successful, which is a very weird. Yeah, Ivan's pointing out I'm always yelling at United on Twitter, and it's funny. Like, who cares? This is, we often talk about in gamification design this idea of a type of mastery called visionary, which maps to the idea I think you're talking about, which is cult, where the customer has started to really internalize their emotional connection to the brand in such a way that they act as though they work there, they invested in it really hard. So here's a question for you. How important is fun in getting people up this path towards what you call true loyalty? Is fun actually important? Or is this more about the substantive connection between the product, the service, and the and the interaction that the users have?
I think fun is absolutely crucial, and I think we have to remember what fun is. One of the things that we do in our Persuasive Design Lab is we ask people what they mean by fun, and the list of words that we get is not all giggling and jumping up and down and screaming and pumping your fists in the air. It's things like social, being with family, feeling of having invented something, feeling of ownership and control. All of the things that we try to design into all of our experiences, they come out. But it's a lot cheaper to get people to do something that's fun than it is to get them to do something that they think of as just drudgery or work. So fun is absolutely critical to the design of loyalty programs and the overall brand experience. People have to they want to feel better about themselves after the experience, after any interaction with the brand or the gamification elements associated with the brand, than they did before. And I think that's a fairly low bar, but it's very often difficult to achieve. It takes really conscious effort to achieve that consistently.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd add to that is a lot of the gamification work I've been involved in is enterprise gamification. So it's with employees and channel partners, and man, there it's almost like you always prep everybody, don't say the word fun before you go into the session with the client because they don't want to hear that word.
Right.
And there are ways around that, and that's a whole separate discussion. But in the loyalty space, we're talking about consumer marketing. So fun should be embraced there. There is absolutely no reason when you're doing consumer marketing that you wouldn't say that fun, just like sex and the offer of free, all those sort of things come into play. And there's no reason we would shy away when we're talking to consumers about making that a focus.
Well, so it's interesting because Dutch is here in the comments is saying, it's weird how hard it is to get people to have fun. So why is it hard to get people to have fun? This is a really something. I mean, you guys think about behavior all the time, and certainly, Barry, even if you want to think about from your employee standpoint, why is it hard when you say to people, "Cool, let's dance, let's do squats in front of a machine for free tickets," or let's dance in front of a machine for a free Coke or something like that? Why is it so hard to get people to do things which are just fun and playful?
So here's what I think it is, Gabe. I don't think it is hard to get people to have fun in the right context. If I go into a bar or bring a kid onto a playground, I'm not even going to question it. That's a place to have fun. But if I'm going into a funeral parlor, that's probably not a place to have fun. And I would say that in most cases, to be really harsh about it, most of our loyalty program contexts have not been much more interesting. Maybe not a funeral parlor, but say like a bank lobby. That's the way we treated it. And so people are not really expecting that to be an environment that's supposed to be fun. We've basically told them this is going to be a very transactional experience. It's all about the numbers and the financials. And so we've actually got to disrupt that thinking first before they're even going to be open to it. And I really think that's part of it. And we may give ourselves an out as brand marketers and say, I'm not really sure people want to do that. Of course they do. They're human beings, right? They want to have fun, but we've never really given them the chance to do that inside the brand of experience of most loyalty programs.
Right. And talk about gamification and onboarding and small wins. If you take the word wins out and replace it with fun, it's the same concept. If somebody has been used to going into a bank, let's say, that is very sterile and very strict and orderly, and the bank decides it wants to be more fun and more open and be a place where people can actually hang out instead of just doing their financial trades, they can actually hang out. That bank probably can't make that step all at once. That's probably going to take time for their customers and for new customers to realize that they're in a different experience. They have to be onboarded into that more fun environment, just as they'd have to be onboarded into a bank altogether.
So back in the conversation, actually, a question was asked about whether or not every brand needs to have a loyalty program, and I want to expand that to the question of, does every experience need to have some kind of loyalty or gamification layer on it as we go forward in the future? You guys see, from 1980, when there were whatever a dozen major loyalty programs, to today, to projected forward 20 years from now, what does this world look like? And is there really an arms race in this direction?
My personal feeling as somebody who's been working in this space a long time is not every brand needs a loyalty program. I mean, I think of a brand like Apple that I love. Apple, I would say their products are their loyalty program. And if anything, their loyalty program, maybe if you want to say to somebody programmatic, is iTunes. I think you could really get in-depth discussion about how iTunes is really what drove a lot of the attachment. I've also said certain products don't need loyalty programs. Beer does not need a loyalty program for the most part, right? It's just something that engenders loyalty in and of itself. Usually a brand needs a loyalty program when there's some deficit that they need to close, which is around their product quality, their service quality, or maybe they're doing great on both of those, but just the competitive environment makes it necessary. So we definitely, absolutely, even though we design and launch loyalty programs as a company, would absolutely say that there are many brands that don't need it. That's probably the minority, but not everybody needs one because they're engendering loyalty in more integral ways to their product or their service approach.
I mean, it's funny.
Yeah, if we're wildly successful, I think that you won't be thinking of programs as loyalty programs so much, because they'll evolve, or will help brands evolve that into just the way they do business, that where companies design themselves for loyalty. And there may be traditional loyalty program aspects to that, but the entire brand thinks like loyalty designers.
Right. So rather than it being this gamification and loyalty thing that happens in a small silo, it's actually integrated with the product design. It's funny because you were talking about sort of like beer companies, and Harold is mentioning in the chat that in fact Heineken has done some gamified loyalty stuff. And I keep thinking about that Tabasco Nation example. I don't know if you guys saw it, but where you were kind of given these, or you were involved in it maybe, virtual points every time you used Tabasco, and they actually didn't care in reality because it was all sort of a big joke. They didn't really care to measure exactly how many drops of Tabasco you were using. But the idea was that people who like hot food are an affinity group. And therefore, there's this idea of creating tribalism. How important do you think tribalism, this idea of finding your tribe associated with a brand or a product, is to creating a sense of loyalty, especially playful or true loyalty, as you describe it?
I think that's a big aspect of it, and I think that identification is probably way more important than points for using the product. I think that I'd rather have well, maybe not. I'm not a big T-shirt guy, but something that I can connect. On my I got a new car last week. The first thing that I did before I even got home was put a St. Louis Blues sticker on the back of it, because I have to be known as a Blues fan.
Yeah, and one critique I would have of most traditional loyalty programs is they don't have a tribal or even social component. And if they do, it's throwing somebody out to Facebook. And that's where oftentimes when we're doing advice on how to integrate gamification into a loyalty program, we're saying use it to open the program up so that I don't have to go to Facebook or Twitter to figure out you have other customers in this program. Use things like the news feeds and the leaderboards and the social challenges so that while I'm inside the program experience, I'm being social. I'm getting that social proof that there's 10 million other people in this program finding it valuable too, so I'm going to stick with it. That to me is actually the sweet spot after onboarding for bringing gamification into a loyalty program, which is making it more tribal or social.
Right. And so if folks want to follow you guys, they can on Twitter. It's at Barry Kirk and at Bill_Hennessey. I think it's Hennessey like the booze, since booze has been such a popular topic today on the show.
It's our theme today.
Yeah, our theme today is alcohol. It should be a Friday show, really. One last question for you before we break, which is about competition. So many loyalty programs don't really have overt competition. Even some simple mechanics like leaderboards, which are so common in gamification, are actually pretty rare in classic loyalty programs. And they tend to shy away from the idea of putting the user and the loyalty program up against each other. Which one of us flies the most? Which one of us buys the most, right? In direct competition. Do you think that's changing over time? Slash, do you have any advice for people thinking about competition in the loyalty space that would be relevant?
Yeah, the experience I've had in applying it in consumer context is that you need to get social right first. So collaborative experiences, which you can do through gamification as well, before bringing in the competitive. And I think that is because people need to get a sense that it's okay to be social in this experience, and it's less exposing to join with others to complete something than it is to compete against them to see who gets it done first. So I think competition has a place in the design, but I would start with the easier place to start really is bringing collaborative experiences in. And then once people really gravitate towards that, then start adding in competitive stuff because now they're ready to do more and be more exposed in the experience.
Right.
Awesome. Well, great, you guys. Thank you so much. Barry, Kirk, Bill, Hennessey.
Thank you.
B-boys from Maritz. We probably need like an oldie timey song to go along with that. Maybe Bette Midler will do it for us. And you can catch Barry and Bill, I think, at G Summit, and me, as well as like 50, 60 other people who'll be there talking to you and hundreds of other folks in the audience, June 10th through the 13th in San Francisco, gsummit.com. Tomorrow's the end of the early bird. You guys, thanks so much for another great episode of the Gamification Revolution. Thanks to you, Barry and Bill, and everybody who's watching and joining
Our pleasure.
with us. Thank you. Hope to see you all again soon. Next week, we'll be back Thursdays at 1 o'clock with another episode and actually more stuff to share with you that you don't know yet. In the meantime, everyone, have a great week. Keep having fun.